Hey guys, today we're going to show you in 5-minute Frontend how to dynamically create a table's content. Like you might get the data from an API or an array of data that you need to map out, and also how you're going to, using just vanilla JavaScript, click on a heading and add some sorting capability to your table rather. Let's go ahead and dive into it. I want to take a moment to thank our long-term sponsor, Dev Mountain Coding Bootcamp. Dev Mountain has a variety of programs from full stack JavaScript to iOS development, UI, UX, quality assurance. They're one of the very few programs that provide housing alongside their tuition, and one of the most affordable programs. I had the pleasure of seeing some of their campuses, and they were gorgeous. I highly encourage you to check them out at devmountain.com. Alright, so as always, we start out with a very basic HTML setup. The only thing that's different in here is we have a margin of 0 on the body, just so that everything is smooth and goes to the edges. We could probably honestly even take that out. We're not doing any responsive design, so let's go ahead and just gut that out. So first thing we're going to start with is a table, right? So to do a responsive table, we're going to have a table, and in our case, we only really care about iterating out dynamically the content, the body of that table. The reason for that is we know what our headers and all that is going to be, and if we wanted to do it dynamically in there, we could. But in our case, we're just going to have a name column and an age column, and that's not going to change. Now, the same way that we're going to eventually solve this for the body, you could go ahead and do for the table head as well. So we're going to use our table header column here. This will provide some additional context, and within that table row for that table head, we're going to have two THs. One is going to be the name, and then one is going to be the age, the one that we're going to be sorting on. So obviously this doesn't look very good. We'll get back to that in a second. And then we'll have our T-body, which is where we are going to have the content come out of. And in this case, just for makes life a little bit easier, although we don't need to use an ID selector since we're only going to have one T-body here, it just makes my life easier to go ahead and do it like that. So that's our table. That's the majority of our content, minus the fact that we're going to add a click event later on. But let's go ahead and just add a little bit of style to this so it looks somewhat okay. So what we're going to do is on our table data and table heads, we're going to go ahead and add a border on it. Nothing too crazy. Border 1 pixel, and we'll make it black, something easy, or maybe like an off gray. I always forget if that might be too light. Is it CC that's darker? There we go. So we'll make it a little bit of off gray. So you'll see that's there. The other thing that we are going to do is we can have the text aligned to the left and give it some padding, but we'll leave that out. So padding about 10 pixels. All right, cool. So we have about 10 pixels padding, and we have this gap in there. Doesn't really look the best. Don't want to deal with the gap. So the border collapse property really just has two things that we can assign to it: collapse, and then I don't remember the other one, the default value. And what that's going to do is it's going to remove that so that each one of these we don't have a big gap between there for if there's a border or not. And then we're gonna just set a width of 100%. Now that we've done that, essentially our table is going to take up the full column, and honestly that padding looks kind of big. So maybe we'll do something like, I originally did 8 pixels, but am I zoomed in a little bit? Oh, that's why it looks a little wonky. Okay, so right now we only have the table headers. Doesn't look super good, and probably even for the THs. Just give it a little bit of a font dash weight to 0 bold, and we could even do something if we want to. And now I'm just sort of playing around. Font dash transform. Is it text dash? Text dash transform uppercase. There we go. And that doesn't look very good either. But we can go ahead and apply a font family on our content for the table, just make a little bit better of Arial and a fallback to sans serif. Cool. So now that we got this going on, what we're what we're going to want to do is to dynamically add data to the application. So in our script tag here, where we're going to be doing our JavaScript, I'm going to create a variable called sort, and I'm going to initialize it to false. This is really, sort direction is probably the a better name now that I think about it. And that's going to be the variable we're going to use to keep track of if we're sorting the column ascending or descending based off the type. In this case, it's a number, but we're going to show you how to sort on multiple columns and let you implement that. So by default, if we want to initialize the column itself, do I actually need column? I don't think I actually use that, but so oftentimes as I do this, I find out ways to improve my code. So we're gonna have table data here, and table data is just going to be an array of objects. Now, in a sort of real world application, this array of objects would probably be coming from some sort of server, and you get some listed data, something like that, and then you take it out. But you can imagine that we got this from an API of sorts. So we have our table data here. Let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit. And now what we want to do is we want to take what's here and append it to the actual application. We want it to put it in there. And we can do that relatively easily by using the inner HTML property of our tBody. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a function. And the reason we want to write a function is we always want to find ways to, if we can, eliminate sort of global variables and just scripts running. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to tell it to inject the content after the window loads. And we'll show you the window on load property in just a second. So we're going to have load table data will be our function. And in load table data, it's going to take a property of table data, which would be this, right? And the reason we're passing that in as a function is we're actually going to reuse this function. What this function's purpose will be is to inject the content. And later on, we'll sort that content, but we're still going to then have to re-inject it to the DOM, which is why we're passing that in. So let's go ahead and take create a const here, and we'll call it table body. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and select that body, that tBody down here we defined a little while ago. We're going to get that by its ID. Now we're going to go ahead and say table data. So that is our content. Now that we have that, we're going to create a local variable here that we're going to use only. We're going to create a variable. I don't know why I said local variable. We're going to create a variable, and we're just going to call this data HTML. We're going to initialize this to an empty string. Now what this is going to do is it's going to give us, we're going to append all the HTML as a string, and then we're going to inject it into the inner HTML here. We can do that pretty easily. So we're going to iterate through a for loop. So we're going to say let data of table data. We're going to, because we want to go through all of it. And in my opinion, for of loops are a much more clean way of reading things, because they can be descriptive. And honestly, this table data name is a bad name. You know, this might be person data, and then let's do that. Person data, and let person, and cool. So now we have that. We will then say data HTML plus equals, and what we're going to do is now just concat onto our string here the HTML we want. So every value inside our table body, or tBody, is going to have a table row. And one thing I'd recommend is if you are ever struggling sort of typing this out piece by piece in a string, this is pretty basic, but sometimes if you're working with legacy applications and you're having to do vanilla DOM manipulation or even jQuery, this HTML you're injecting, you can get very long. I'd actually recommend that, like, all right, let me just type into here what it is, because I have my IntelliSense and I can do what I want, hard coding it, seeing if it says, and then copy that and putting it in here. But we're not going to do that, but I did want to recommend that because, you know, we don't have IntelliSense as we're typing this out in a string, and we're more likely to have mistakes. So what we're going to have is a single row with 2 rows of data here, right? And so let's go ahead and type that out. And now that we have that, all we have to do is use a little bit of string interpolation, and we can use this, and we'll say person.name, because that's going to be the first column here. And then we're going to say person dot age, and that's going to be the same value there. Now if we were to console log this, we'll just say data HTML, and one issue you're going to see in a second is if we call load table data and then we pass in person data, this is all going to work just fine. You'll see that we get all our data and our numbers and whatnot, and we're assuming that it's properly formatted. We haven't seen it inject yet, but you may see in just a second that this might actually cause an issue. And why is it going to cause an issue? Well, although our JavaScript is ready, our tBody element maybe isn't in the DOM yet. And so you'll see when we actually go and say tablebody.innerHTML, and we set this equal to data HTML, you'll see cannot set property inner HTML of null. So when it actually goes to get table data, it doesn't exist. It's not in the body. So how do we solve this rather than just injecting this? Well, there's a couple different ways. The way that I would normally do it is with onload. And onload is, so the window object, obviously the window you're looking at, we would simply set a callback function or arrow function here, and we'd say when this loads, go ahead and load the table data, and then we'll pass in our table data. And so that solves that issue, so that now when we go ahead and person data is not iterable. Oh, because I changed this to person data. There we go. And now we don't have that issue. And not only that, you can see we injected the content. Now this content's not sorted, and honestly the table is a little funky, but we now have the ability to dynamically inject the content. So one additional little style thing we can do is we can use the pseudo selector nth child to go ahead and give this a slightly different colored background. And so we could do something like this, where we say on every table row for the nth child, and we'll put even for each even row, go ahead and give it a background dash color of hashtag DDD. And now you'll see we have this nice little alter thing. And if you were doing something like, you know, if you wanted to do something like a desktop first, where we could add a simple hover effect on here as well. Nothing too crazy, and I'll do it real quick. So table row, and on table row we had a hover effect, and maybe on hover we set the color of the text to white, and then we set the background color to black. And one thing is, like, you'll see we can do something like that relatively easily. One thing about hover effects is typically if you're using tables, oftentimes you're actually doing a desktop first approach. You want to eliminate tables, and instead of doing maybe like listing cards, so that, you know, this row data doesn't translate very well. Right here we have 2 rows, but let's say we had 10 pieces of data, and you can see even with this, as we probably won't get below around 330 pixels. This is usually considered about the smallest, right? So like if you were to go into here and you were to see like what is considered a small mobile, 320, right? But hover effects are pretty much for desktop only, or are for desktop only, but you will really only see them if you know, tables you're taking a desktop first approach. Anyhow, so now that we have the ability to load the data, what we want to do next is sort the data, right? And that should be pretty straightforward. We have an ability to auto-inject the content. Now, what we want to do is when we click on age, we want to, on click, we want to sort our column. So this is going to be a generic sort, and on sort our column, what we're going to do here is we're going to pass in a value here. In our case, it's just going to be a column name, and so our column name will be age, right? And we're basing that off of right here, because what we're going to do is we're going to use some bracket notation to sort it. Now, although I'm only going to show you how to sort by number, and if you want to sort by string, you'll be able to do this relatively easily. You'll see how we're going to set it up pretty quickly with a simple switch case. So we're going to have sort column as we are calling it down below, and in there we're going to take in a just a column name. And what column name is going to do is first we're going to actually remember this sort direction. We're just going to set it equal to the opposite, right? If it's ascending, we want it to be descending. If it's descending, we want it to be ascending. Now, we can test all this that it's clicking relatively easily with console log, but I think we'll find out in a second when it actually changes. Now, what we want to do here is do a switch. We're going to create a data type here. And we're going to set this equal to type of column name. But it's more than that, right? What we want to do is actually, because this is always going to be a string that's being passed in here, we want the type of the parameter value. So what we're going to do is we can go and say, hey, person data, and just get the first value. Now, if you were dealing with an asynchronous source, so now that we have that, we can do type of that first value. But if you're dealing with asynchronous source, you're going to need to be more careful. So perhaps maybe this doesn't exist and whatnot, and you're just going to have it return undefined. But you'll see here when we console.log data type, and we click on age, we're getting a number, right? Pretty straightforward. So we're using bracket. We're selecting the first value in the array, which is this, and then we're using bracket notation to pass in and select age, which returns 31. Then we check the data type, and then we change the ascending or descending value. Now, in our switch case, we're going to check that data type, and on here we're going to say, hey, if the case is number, go ahead and sort column number. Sort column. Oh, we haven't written this function yet. Whoops. I was like, what is sort column number? So we're going to write a function, because the way JavaScript sort works in arrays is it's different if it's numbers, it's different if it's strings and booleans and things like that. So that's why we have to check the data type to make sure we're doing everything we want, that we're expecting it to be. So we're going to have sort number column, and in here we are going to pass in that sort value because we need to know which way we're going, as well as the column name because we need to know what to sort it on. So in here, all we're going to do is take our original table data and reset it to table data.sort, taking a callback function, and then we'll say P1, P2 for person 1, person 2. A little bit of a arrow function here. I'm not going to use too short-handed because it's going to get a little convoluted. And we'll use a ternary here. So we're going to say, hey, if sort is true, meaning it's ascending or descending, whatever you set your true value to be, go ahead and set your P1 column name, that person 1, followed by the column that you're sorting minus P2 column name. And if it's not, then we want to essentially do the opposite, where we're going to take this and subtract it the other way, and that will give us our ascending descending value. And now we'll go ahead and sort the data. So let's go ahead and swap this P2, P1. And so now that we've done this, we just need to go ahead and call sort number column, pass in sort direction rather, and then pass in the column name, then break. And you can see how now that we have our various switch statement, we can add a string and a boolean, and then you're probably not going to sort by objects or arrays, right? But now you can do various sorts on your array. And then finally, after this updates, and we can see that real quick actually working as we console.log person data, which, by the way, I put table data once again. But we can see this working real quick, where now we click on it, you'll see that it goes 14 to 31 all that, and so it's sorting just fine. And if we were to click on it again, we should have the reverse where it goes 31 to 14. Excellent. All we have to do is take that original function we wrote, load table data, and in here, all we need to do is pass in our person data. Although realistically, we could probably had just, since we're sort of treating person data here as a global, we wouldn't even have had to do that, but I feel better doing it this way. And now when we click on it, you'll see that it's going to sort it dynamically. And we have sort of the framework in place to add ascending or descending values. So something to move forward with and sort of keep you busy and fun on it is to maybe add an icon that keeps track if it's ascending or descending, as well as sort by strings. But you have everything you need now to go ahead and jump into it and get going. But that's basically how you set up a dynamic table that's auto-injecting content from like an asynchronous source, although we had it come from a synchronous source, and then sorting it and whatnot. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Check out my courses in the description below. I'll see you guys in the next video. And as always, if you have any sort of mini projects like this that you're interested in, just drop them in the comments below. This one was actually from a comment from the snack bar notification. But as I appreciate it. See you guys next time. Bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to check out my 100 Algorithm Challenge course. Get you prepped for those technical interviews to make sure you get nice offers. I actually just added some new content to it so you can get prepared for those technical phone screens as well. There's a link in the description to get it for just $9.99.